Lesson 20. Long-term recovery and rebuilding your life. Recovery after schizophrenia does not end the moment symptoms subside and your condition stabilizes thanks to treatment. That is only the beginning of a longer, more mature path, a path that leads not just to survival, but to rebuilding a full, meaningful, and valuable life. Many people say that the first year after an episode feels like waking up in a new reality, calmer but unfamiliar. Questions appear: who am I now? What is left of my old life? How do I rebuild my future without clinging to fear or to my former ambitions? How do I regain a sense of meaning? This lesson is an answer to those questions. It is a chapter about rebirth, not about illness. Modern therapeutic programs emphasize that long-term recovery does not mean the absence of symptoms. It means rebuilding your own identity, learning to live in harmony with yourself and regaining influence over the direction in which you are heading. Recovery is not a race, nor is it a return to your former self. It is the process of creating a new self, more aware, calmer, and based on the experience brought by the mental health crisis. A Buddhist perspective offers valuable wisdom here. A person is not a single rigid form. You are like a river that changes shape but never stops flowing. The episode of illness is not a break in your journey, but one of its bends. Through this bend, the possibility appears to look at yourself differently, with more softness, without the pressure of old ambitions, and with the understanding that your life does not have to look the way you once imagined for it to be good. Rebuilding identity after illness. One of the deepest consequences of a schizophrenia episode is that the illness shifts your self-image. In the stabilization phase, many people say they feel as if they are standing beside their own life, as if the old me were someone distant, while the new me is not yet known, formed or secure. This is a natural stage of recovery, which therapeutic programs call the reconstruction of identity. A psychotic episode is an intense experience. It affects thoughts, emotions, your image of the world and of yourself. It is no surprise that after such an experience the question appears, who am I now? This question is not a sign of crisis, it is a sign of maturation. Identity is not something fixed, and the illness is not who you are. It is simply an event in your life. Just like an accident, a divorce, losing a job or the birth of a child, it transforms you, but it does not define the whole of your being. It is worth looking at yourself not as someone worse than before the illness, but as a person who has walked an exceptionally difficult path and came out of it alive. The resilience you gained has not disappeared. Your fears are part of the story, but your worth remains untouched. Rebuilding identity means that you are slowly creating a new image of yourself, more aware, less based on ego and more grounded in experience, wisdom and mindfulness. Buddhist teachings point out that we are not fixed, closed entities. Each of us is a process that changes day by day. When you stop clinging tightly to your old self, space for growth appears. You do not have to go back to who you were. You can become someone new, calmer, wiser, more empathetic and more attentive towards yourself. Identity after illness can be not only different, it can be deeper. Schizophrenia breaks the old ego, creating a new one that is healthier and more resilient. This new self-identification is fuller and more aligned with your inner instinct. Rebuilding self-worth and combating self-stigma. Mental illness often leaves a mark on self-esteem. People start to feel that they have failed, that they are weak or not like others. Sometimes they feel ashamed of their behavior during the psychotic period, even though it was not the result of their character, but of disturbed brain biology. This sense of shame, directed against oneself, is one of the heaviest burdens after an episode. In psychology, it is called self-stigma. Self-stigma does not come from truth. It comes from suffering. It is the way in which the mind tries to find someone to blame for what happened. But the illness is not anyone's fault. It is a biological phenomenon that affects people regardless of their strength, intelligence, morality, or motivation. Rebuilding self-worth begins with understanding this one truth: you did nothing wrong. You did not choose the illness. You did not deserve the episode. The fact that today you want to learn, grow, read this book and work on yourself, this is proof of your strength, not your weakness. The hardest form of courage is to look at yourself with kindness when you feel ashamed. And yet it is precisely kindness that heals the most effectively. Treat yourself with the same understanding you would offer your own sick child. It is not the child's fault that it became ill. It deserves your love, leniency, and care. Look at yourself through eyes full of humility towards fate, forgiving unintentional missteps and filled with hope, even with certainty, about a better tomorrow. It is also worth remembering that self-stigma is a voice you do not have to listen to. It is like an echo of old suffering, not a statement of facts. You can replace it with a different narrative, that you are a human being who has gone through something enormously difficult and is still standing, still walking, still searching. This is not a sign of weakness, it is a testimony of survival. Buddhism says that true dignity does not come from strength, but from awareness. When you look at yourself without judgment, compassion appears, and self-compassion is one of the most effective ways to heal the mind. Your value has not diminished. You simply need to learn to see it again. Realistic planning for the future and the method of small steps. When your mental state starts to stabilize, the question of the future naturally arises. Some people want to return to their former pace immediately, others are afraid of strain and prefer not to plan anything. Both responses are understandable, but neither is a stable foundation. The most effective way of returning to life is planning in small steps, in line with the principles of recovery. Long-term goals should be realistic and gentle. The aim is not to return to full activity in a few months, but to create a plan that will not overload your nervous system. These can be personal, social, spiritual, educational, or professional goals. It does not matter whether they concern work, relationships, independence, or developing a hobby. What matters is that they are yours. The method of small steps means that you break each big goal down into a series of small, manageable stages. If your goal is to return to work, the first stage might be a walk around the neighborhood to test your tolerance for stimulation. The next step might be a meeting with a career advisor. After that, a few hours of volunteering. You set the pace, and every small change is a success, not only the final goal. Psychologists offer a very useful guideline here: plan your goals in a way that is measurable and time-limited. Goals should have a concrete form and a time frame for their completion. A concrete form means defining them precisely. You do not set a goal of someday becoming wealthy, but specify an exact amount saved in your savings account, for example by the end of the year. It is similar with academic or professional achievements. Nothing stops you from gaining titles and awards. Among people with schizophrenia there are even Nobel Prize laureates, but this requires very precise planning. Using the method of small, concrete steps, set yourself the goal of enrolling in specific studies, trainings, or courses. Your future is open and full of possibilities. Schizophrenia has destroyed old limits and mental barriers, giving potential to new goals that are no longer constrained by them. Most importantly, do not compare yourself to your former self or to other people. Rebuilding is not a competition. You do not have to prove to the world that you are the same as you once were and re-enter the rat race. Your future does not have to be a copy of your past. It can be a new, calmer chapter. Free from the old self. Finding meaning and spirituality in your new life. After a schizophrenia episode, many people face a question older than any illness: why did this happen? This is not about looking for someone to blame, but about a natural attempt to understand your own story. When life suddenly changes direction, the need to find meaning arises, a structure that organizes your experience and gives it a deeper dimension. In recovery programs, this is called meaning-making, the process in which a person creates a personal narrative that allows them to view their journey not only through the lens of pain, but also of growth. Spirituality can be a great support in this process, but only when it is calm, grounded, and unforced. It is not about religious ecstasy or overinterpretations that can lead to distorted thinking. It is about mature, quiet spirituality whose foundations are acceptance, humility towards fate, mindfulness, and compassion for oneself. In this sense, Buddhism is particularly helpful. It does not impose dogmas, does not place obligations, does not create systems of rewards and punishments. Buddhism teaches that life is a process, and meaning is born in the moment when we stop fighting what we cannot change and begin to move forward with openness. A mental health crisis can rearrange your values. What once seemed most important, status, achievements, competition, ambition, may lose its power after an episode. In their place, a longing for simplicity, calm, and balance may appear. Some discover that their true meaning lies in family, others in helping people, still others in solitary passions, nature, art, meditation, or everyday routine. Every path is good if it leads to inner peace. It is worth remembering, though, that meaning does not appear instantly. You do not have to have answers to all questions right away. Meaning is born from time, experience, and observation, like a seed that sprouts slowly, in the rhythm of nature. Sometimes meaning comes through action, in small daily tasks, routines, helping others, working with a therapist, developing a passion. Sometimes it appears suddenly, in a moment of silence, in seeing the world from a distance, in meditation, in breathing, in an act of acceptance. Over time you may begin to see that the psychotic episode had its own kind of meaning. Worthless friendships and relationships ended. You dropped out of a senseless rat race and finally have time to take care of yourself. Your values and life goals have been put to the test. In Buddhism, one speaks of karma at work, a natural law whose task is to shape our experiences. Karma is what shapes your personality, making you a more enlightened, wiser, and freer being. One could provocatively say that schizophrenia serves you better than it seems at first sight. Perhaps it should be seen as a gift from heaven, a storm which, though violent, brings life-giving rain, clears the soil of impurities, and refreshes the air. Every storm ends with a beautiful rainbow, a cloudless sky, and the smell of freshness. Your life has not lost its meaning because of the illness. It has changed its shape, and now is the time to discover which shape will be true for you. Spirituality, in any form, can be a guide on this path. It can help you see that even difficult experiences contain the potential for growth, and that the silence after the storm can become the place of a new, deeper freedom. Psychological resilience and the ability to rise after crises. Psychological resilience does not mean that nothing affects you. It also does not mean that you will no longer experience difficult feelings, uncertainty, or mood swings. In reality, resilience, according to definitions used in the treatment of mental illness, is the ability to return to balance after a period of strain. It is not an inborn trait, but a capacity that can be developed, strengthened, and nurtured over time. Schizophrenia, especially after a first episode, can shake your sense of stability. It is natural to feel more vulnerable, more cautious, perhaps more fragile. Yet it is precisely on this fragility that the most mature form of strength can be built, one that does not consist in denying difficulties, but in being able to endure them without losing yourself. Recovery-oriented therapy teaches that resilience is not heroism. It is a daily practice in regulating sleep, taking medication, seeking support, maintaining routine, and being aware of your own limits. The most important element of resilience is the ability to get up after crises. And that does not mean an immediate return to your former form, but a calm, gradual rising from the level to which life has pushed you down. Sometimes this process takes weeks, sometimes months, but every step matters. The key is the awareness that a crisis is not a failure, it is part of your story. Relapses are a normal element of the illness and do not mean that you did something wrong. They only show that your nervous system has been overloaded and needs support, just as the body needs a bandage after an injury. Building resilience also means learning new skills, recognizing the line beyond which overload begins, letting go of activities that do not serve your recovery, asking for help when you need it, using tools that calm the mind, and, above all, looking at yourself without judgment. In this process, it is worth drawing inspiration from the Buddhist teaching on the softness of mind. In Buddhism, strength is not hardness. Strength is flexibility. A tree that does not bend breaks in a storm. A tree that can bow under the weight of the wind is still standing after every gale. It is the same with a human being. It is not rigidity that protects you, but the ability to adapt, to rest, to take a breath, and to rise slowly. Psychological resilience does not mean that life will be easy. It means that whatever happens, you can find your way back to yourself. And with every difficulty you become more mature, more aware, and more prepared for the future. Your strength does not lie in never falling, but in being able to get up each time, more calmly, more wisely and more consciously than before. Return to social and occupational roles. Returning to social and occupational roles after a schizophrenia episode is one of the most important and at the same time most delicate stages of recovery. Modern recovery programs emphasize that a person does not recover for themselves alone, but for life, for contact with people, for creating relationships, for participating in the world, for a sense of agency and purpose. A social and work role is not just a duty. It is a form of anchoring. It stabilizes the rhythm of the day, strengthens self-worth, and gives a sense of belonging. At the same time, it is unrealistic to expect that returning to your previous roles will happen quickly and effortlessly. After an episode, you need time to regain strength, adjust to the effects of medication, rebuild working memory, concentration, and stress tolerance. Your brain is like a body after a serious injury. It needs rehabilitation, and overloading it can do more harm than good. That is why the most important rule in returning to activity is slowness and a gradual increase of effort. Many people after illness feel pressure to return to normal, pressure coming from their surroundings, family, society, and sometimes from their own perfectionism. Yet recovery emphasizes that returning to roles is not an exam. You do not have to prove that you are the same as before, because your life is not a competition. You are not going back in order to meet other people's expectations, but to find a balance that is possible here and now, at your own pace. It is good to start with small, simple roles, helping at home, small responsibilities, short conversations, contact with neighbors, shopping, walks, a few hours of volunteering. These are natural stages of rebuilding social resilience. Each of these activities teaches you again how to function among people, without pressure, without stress, without having to prove anything. When you feel that your energy is more stable, you can introduce further elements, a course, hobby classes, an internship, part-time work. In many countries, there are special supported employment programs for people after psychotic episodes, adapted to their abilities, free from pressure, built on a kind attitude and regular contact with a therapist. If you have such an option, it is worth using it because it gives you a sense of safety and support. Returning to social roles does not always mean going back to the same place, the same person, and the same ambitions. Sometimes the trauma of illness makes you reassess your entire life. Some people return to their old professions, others discover that they want something different, calmer, more human, less stressful. That is also completely fine. The illness did not take away your right to change direction. On the contrary, it gave you the opportunity to ask yourself what you really want. The key skill in this process is carefully observing signals from your body and mind. If you notice that tension is increasing, insomnia appears, there are too many stimuli, exhaustion, difficulties with concentration, it is worth slowing down, taking a step back, reorganizing your daily rhythm again, and only then moving on. Your aim is not to be fast. Your aim is to be stable. Returning to social and occupational roles is not a path upward, but a path forward, slow, calm, sometimes requiring rest, but always possible. Whatever direction you choose, remember, you do not have to be perfect. It is enough that you are real. Life beyond the diagnosis, redefining normality. After a schizophrenia episode, Many people struggle with one recurring question: will I ever be normal again? In reality, however, the very question comes from a false assumption that there exists one universal form of normality that everyone should strive for. Yet recovery psychology, modern psychiatry, and the wisdom of spiritual traditions all emphasize something quite different. Normality is not a state, but a range. It is broad, changeable, diverse, and each person fits into it in a slightly different way. One of the leading Polish psychiatrists wrote in his book on schizophrenia that no one is actually either fully mentally healthy or fully ill. Every human being functions somewhere between these poles, sometimes more to the left, sometimes more to the right. That is what normality looks like. It does not mean full mental health. With time you will begin to see how many problems other people carry within themselves. Kempinski divided society not into the ill and the healthy, but into the diagnosed and the undiagnosed. The diagnosed, in his view, are in a better position precisely because they know about their condition and have already started appropriate treatment. A large part of society is convinced of its mental health while showing attitudes and behaviors suggesting that it is stuck in a kind of collective mass psychosis. You have the chance to start noticing this. A diagnosis of schizophrenia can at first narrow the way you see yourself. A person spontaneously begins to see themselves through the lens of the illness, as if it had become their label, their new definition. This is a natural reaction after a major crisis, but over time it is worth recognizing that the diagnosis is only one element of your life. It is not the name of your character, your spirituality, your worth, your future, or your meaning. Living beyond the diagnosis means that you allow yourself to be a whole person, not ill, not post-episode, not disordered, but someone who has abilities, talents, fears, sensitivity, dreams, a sense of humor, and a rhythm of being. Many people after illness discover that their true normality is calmer, more authentic, and less dependent on other people's opinions than it used to be. The diagnosis does not have to close down your life. It can be the moment when it is reorganized. It is worth remembering that people all over the world live with all kinds of mental difficulties: depression, anxiety disorders, bipolar disorder, addictions, ADHD, autism spectrum, grief, trauma, neuroses. Mental health problems are part of human experience, not an exception. WHO statistics are clear. Every fourth person in the world experiences some mental disorder during their lifetime. Schizophrenia is simply one of them, rarer, but not more abnormal. Redefining normality also means that you set new goals and build new qualities in your life: stability, calm, mindfulness, relationships based on sincerity rather than perfection. You do not have to pretend that nothing happened. You do not have to return to your old version of yourself. You can allow yourself to live differently, in the way you really need now. A Buddhist perspective adds one more aspect: normality is not a goal, but an illusion created by society. What truly matters in life is presence, clarity of mind, kindness, and the ability to live with what is. If you can live in harmony with yourself, at your pace, in your rhythm, in line with your nature, that is your normality. So living beyond the diagnosis does not mean pretending it does not exist. It means not allowing it to take control over your self-image. You are bigger than your illness. There is a road ahead of you that does not have to be winding or dark. It can be bright if you allow yourself not to go back to old definitions, but to create new ones that are true. Hope and long-term remission statistics. One of the most important and at the same time least discussed topics in schizophrenia is hope. Many people who have gone through a psychotic episode are afraid of the future. They imagine it as a constant chain of relapses, hospital stays, and loss of stability. Meanwhile, modern psychiatry and recovery programs are unequivocal on this point. Schizophrenia is an illness you can live with for a long time, in a stable and good way. Medical statistics are much more optimistic than most people expect. Studies by the WHO, the APA, and the latest meta-analyses show that around 20 to 25% of people after a first episode never experience a relapse again. 40 to 50% have occasional relapses but live with long, often many-year periods of stability. Only 20 to 30% require more intensive support and frequent care. This means that the majority of people with schizophrenia live in stable remissions, often returning to work, relationships, education, and even developing passions and goals they did not have the courage to pursue before. The more modern the treatment, the longer the remissions and the lower the risk of relapse. Contemporary pharmacotherapy works more and more precisely, and it is supported by psychosocial programs, skills training, family therapy, mindfulness, recovery coaching, and individualized support plans. All this means that the future of a person with this illness no longer resembles the future from 40 years ago. Old statistics belong to the past. Today's medicine offers real possibilities for a full and stable life. Hope is therefore not naive. Hope is based on facts. Every month of stability strengthens your body. Every year of treatment shapes your nervous system toward greater balance, and every subsequent remission tends to be longer and more predictable than the previous one. Time becomes your ally. This does not mean that the illness disappears, it means that it becomes manageable. No one expects your life to look exactly as it did before the episode. It will be different, but not worse. Different does not mean weaker. Sometimes this different is precisely the beginning of a new, more mature version of you, the calmer, more aware, less lost in the rush of the world. Hope means that you give yourself the right to live a life that is possible here and now, and one that can continue to grow over time. There is no single path of recovery. There is no single script. There is, however, a genuine chance of a good life, and that chance is greater than you think. Summary. Lesson 20 is the symbolic closing of the whole path you have walked in this program. It touches on the deepest themes, because it speaks not only about symptoms or coping techniques, but about your life as a whole, about identity, future, meaning, psychological resilience, and returning to the world. After a schizophrenia episode, a person often feels that everything must be built from scratch. This lesson shows that this is not true. You are not starting from zero, but from the place where you are today, wiser, more self-aware, more experienced. The core message of this lesson is, the future exists, and you have influence over it. The illness does not take away your right to live, does not close the road, does not determine your fate. You can rebuild your identity if you allow it to grow slowly, just as a human being grows after every difficulty. You can gradually return to social and occupational roles, not because you have to prove you are the same as before, but because your life is worth creating, step by step, at your own pace. In this lesson you also see that hope is not an empty word, but a conclusion drawn from research, statistics, and the experiences of millions of people around the world. Most live with long remissions, and many never experience a relapse. What your life will look like depends not on fears, but on gradually building balance in relationships, in everyday life, in spirituality, in planning the future. The most important thing is this: you are not defined by your illness. You have the right to live, to create, to love, to regain strength, to experience joy and ordinary days. You have the right to feel like yourself, not a patient, not a diagnosis, but a human being who has gone through a difficult journey and continues on. This lesson is the beginning of a new chapter, not the end of the work. From now on, your task is not to defeat the illness, but to build a life in which you can be fully yourself, more calmly, more wisely, more gently.